We begin now at the top of Daf Beis Amud Aleph Meseches Makkos. This is Makkos Daf 2a. The Mishnah says, Ketzad ha'edim nasim zomamin. How do witnesses become falsified witnesses? And the Mishnah says the following case, Me'idin anu bi'ish ploni. Let's say we testify against a certain person, shehu ben grusha or ben chalutza, that he's the son of a divorcee or he's the son of a chalutza. This is talking about a Kohen. Essentially, the edim are testifying that this particular Kohen does not have the status of a Kohen because his father, who was a Kohen, married a grusha or a chalutza who he's not allowed to marry, so he has the status of what's called a cholol. He's essentially profaned from the kahuna, and then it turns out that these witnesses are false witnesses. So ein omrim, we don't say yasa zeh ben grusha ben chalutza tachtav, that this false witness should become also a ben grusha ben chalutza, that he should be considered a cholol. Normally, the punishment when it comes to edim zomin is kasher zaman. What they try to do to the defendant, that's what we do to them. But we don't say that in this case. Elalok arboim. Rather, we say in this particular case that they get malchus arboim, they get 40 lashes. And similarly, the Mishnah says, Me'idin anu bish ploni. Let's say they say we're testifying against a certain person, shu chayev liglos, that he's chayev to go to Golus, he's chayev to be exiled because he killed someone b'shogeg, he killed someone by mistake. Ein omrim yigla zeh tachtav. We don't say that this person, this witness, if he turns out to be an eid zomim, if he turns out that these are false witnesses, we don't say that he's exiled instead. We don't say that he gets that punishment of kasher zamam. Ella rather lok arboim. Again, he gets malchus arboim, he gets 40 lashes. And Rashi explains, Ketzad ha'edim nasim zomamin. How did the witnesses become zomin? B'gemar mefarish my kamer. The Gemara will explain, because it's a strange question, how do the edim become zomamin? And then you give a case where they actually don't get the punishment of kasher zamam. As ish ploni kohen, the case again is they're testifying against a certain person who's a kohen, shu ben grush, that he's the son of a divorcee, b'fanenu nisgar she'imo kodem shenola. The witnesses say, in front of us we saw his mother get divorced before he was born, v'areu cholol u'pasol, therefore he's considered to be a cholol, and he is disqualified. Ein omrim, we do not say im huzmu, if they become edim zomim, and if they become falsified, vehein kohanim, and let's say the edim happen to be kohanim, yasa zeh ben grusha v'chalutza, that we're going to make this witness into also he has the status of a ben grusha v'chalutza, he also has the status of a cholol, l'kayim bo kasher zamam, will fulfill the pasuk of kasher zamam, what they try to do, we're going to do to them. We don't say that. Elasofeg esar boim, rather we give them 40 lashes of a gemar mefarish taima, and the Gemara will explain the reason. And shechayev golus, again, if they testify about a certain person that he's chayev golus, shahara ges nefesh b'shogeg, that he killed someone by mistake. And the Gemara says, "Haketzad ein ha'idim nasim zomamin miboile." The question of the Mishnah should have been, how do the witnesses not become zomamin? That again is the question that we just alluded to when we mentioned Rashi. Rashi explains, "Hachi garsin and haketzad ein ha'idim nasim zomamin miboile ve'od the katani lakamon al amru lahem." That's just the gear, so we're about to see. Ketzad ein ha'idim nasim zomamin miboile. It should say, how do the witnesses not become zomamin? To halo mekayemis bu kasher zamam, because again we're not fulfilling with them the idea of kasher zamam. So the Mishnah should actually say what's an exception to the normal situation of Edom Zomin. And the Gemara continues, and further, katani lakamon, from the fact that we learn later on, avol amru lahem hechatem meidin, if they say to them, how are you testifying to this, shari ba'oso hayom, because on that day that you're claiming to have seen this happen, atem hayisem imanu b'makom ploni, you were with us in a particular place, harei elu zomin, that's a situation of Edom Zomin. And we'll read the parentheses, mechlal de elu ein zomin, that implies that this particular case in our Mishnah is not a typical case of Edom Zomin. Essentially, the Gemara is asking, the Mishnah later describes Edom Zomin, so this Mishnah is not the one that's describing Edom Zomin. Rashi explains, and further, my kaboy tana ketzad nasin zomin, why is the Tana asking, how do they become zomin? Hakatani lalakamon, it says later on, ketzad din zomin, how does the din of zomin work? The katani v'masnis and avalamru lehem hamazimim, heichatem mi'idim eidozev halo hayisem imanu osayom b'makom ploni v'chulu. The whole idea of Edom Zomin is described later on. The idea is imanu hayisem. And so the question is over here again, what is the idea of the question in this Mishnah of Ketzad ha'edim nasim zomamin, and then continuing and giving a case where they don't get the punishment of kasher zamam? And the Gemara continues and answers, Tana Hasam Kai, the Tana of our Mishnah, he's going on something we said over there. This is referring to the Mesechet previously, Mesechet Sanhedrin. The Mishnah here is following up on the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. What did it say in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin? It said, Kol HaZomim Makdimin Liosa Misa. It says that all Zomim, they get that Misa, that death penalty, they try to give the defendant. Chutz mi Zomim Bas Kohen Uboel, except by the case where you have Edom Zomin in a situation of adultery between the daughter of a Kohen and the person she's having adultery with. Over there, it's a different misa that's given to the bas kohen than is given to the man. And so over there, they do not get the misa that they're trying to give her. She'ein makdimin la'osa misa, they don't get that death penalty that they're trying to give her. Ela l'misa acheres, rather they get a different death penalty. We'll see Rashi in a moment. And so the Mishnah here is continuing that theme. V'yesh edim zomen acherim, there's another example of edim zomen. She'ein osin bohen din hazama kol ikr, that we don't do any idea of the din of hazama. We don't do any kasher zaman. We don't give them at all what they tried to do. Ela malkas arboim, rather we give them 40 lashes. Ketzat hasom idananu bishploni shu ben grusha or ben chalutza. Again, they're testifying against a certain person that he is a ben grusha ben chalutza. Ein omer miyasa zeh ben grusha ben chalutza tachtav. We don't say that this person, he becomes a ben grusha ben chalutza instead. Ela, rather lokas arboim, rather we say that he gets 40 malkas. And Rashi explains, Hasam Kai, we're going on over there, Misanhedrin Solik, we're picking up from Meseches Sanhedrin, Detnan Beshili Elohein HaNechnakin. We learn in the Mishnah at the end of Parak Elohein HaNechnakin, the Husiyuma de Sanhedrin, that's the end of Sanhedrin, the Yesh Zomim Shenishtanu B'mixas Midin Hazama. There are cases of Zomim who have a slightly different halacha from the standard din of Hazama, Kedektani Kol Hazomin, Makdimin Lo Samitza. All these Zomin, they get that death penalty, Kolomar Ein Lahem Letzapos Misa Acheres, meaning they shouldn't look towards a different death penalty. Mashkimin la'osa misa, they get that same death penalty, shenigmar bo'adino shalnidon, which they were trying to give to the defendant, which the verdict was against the defendant, chutz mizome bas kohen, with the exception of the edim zomen by bas kohen. This is a bas kohen who's nesua, she's married, she's not in the stage of erison, but in the stage of nesua, in the final stage of marriage. Shafa bi shenigmar dino l'sreifa al pm, even though her verdict actually is sreifa, she gets a punishment of sreifa through their testimony, but they don't get that heim bechenek, they're going to get the punishment of chenek, strangulation, not the punishment of streifa, burning. Kiri alfin and hasam, like we learn out over there, he besreifa, she gets streifa, v'ein bo'ala besreifa, but the man that she's having adultery with does not get streifa. Ela bechenek, rather he gets chenek, kashar eshes ish, like other cases of adultery, v'hazomimin, mashkimin lemisa shechayv was haboel, and the edom zomin, they're going to get the misa which they tried to give the man, techsiv kasher zamam lasos la'achiv, it says to his brother, that's where kasher zamam applies, v'lo la'achos, or not to his sister, so what they tried to give to the man, that's what they get. They do not get the punishment that they tried to give to the Bas Kohen. The Kamar Hachan says over here, Odiesh Zoman Acherim. Our Mishnah is saying that there's another case of Zomamin. She'ein Mekaimin Bohen Din Hazam Aklal, where there's no Din Hazam at all. There is no Kasher Zomam. Elamalkus, they get the punishment of lashes. The Elamafarish Ketzad, and so on that we're explaining how so. Osan Ha'edim She'ein Mekaimin Ben Din Hazam. What is that case of witnesses that they don't get this Din Hazama? Nasin Zoman Mi Demonu, and then the Mishnah goes on to say the case, again, as we saw in the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Minohani Mili, from where do we know this? Some Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, the Yomar Krutz, because the pasuk says, Va'asisem lo kasher zaman, says you're going to do to him like he tried to do to the defendant, and we understand from that, lo, you do it to him, velo lazaro, not to his children. And so if you're going to say, let's say, by the case where he's testifying about the defendant that he's a cholol, that he's a ben grusha ben chalutza, so if you're going to make the edim zomamin into ben grusha ben chalutza, that's going to apply to their children also. Their children also are going to lose the status of kahuna, but that would not be in line with what the pasuk says. The pasuk says you're going to do it to him, and we say again, lo to him, velo lazaro, not to the children, and that's why we cannot apply the standard punishment of kasher zamam, so that's why the punishment is instead malchus arboim. But the Gemara continues and asks, v'lifsalu lididei velo lifsalu lazari, well, why not just disqualify him from the kuna, but then say that doesn't apply to his children, and we could still apply kasher zamam? The Gemara says no, because boinam kasher zamam lasos v'lek, it needs to be what they tried to do. That would not be what they tried to do. They tried to disqualify not only the defendant, but also his future generations, his descendants, and so therefore that would not fulfill kasher zamam. Kasher zamam cannot be fulfilled in this situation. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Bar Pada says, Kal v'chomer, the reason why they don't become chalolim is because of the following, Kal v'chomer. Umaha mechalal, if the person who causes cholol, eino mischalal, he doesn't become a cholol. Habolachal, someone who's simply attempting to cause someone to be a cholol, v'lo chilon, doesn't even succeed, eino din shelo yischalal, isn't it true that he shouldn't become a cholol? The Gemara says, well, maskif lo Ravina. Ravina asks on that approach, Imkain, if that's the case, bitalta Torah Edom Zomin, you've completely nullified the whole idea of Edom Zomin, because the whole concept of Edom Zomin is that they just tried to do it and they didn't succeed, and so you cannot give that answer. And Rashi explains, velo lazaro, again, you have to do it to him and not his children. If you're going to make the witness into a cholol, v'hu kohen, and he's a kohen, pasal de zaro liolam, now you've also disqualified his children forever. And then they said, well, why not just disqualify him and not his children? But the Gemara said, inon kasher zamam. That's a problem because that's not called kasher zamam. We need to have kasher zamam. Vu zamam lifsol es hanidon v'yasaro. He was trying to disqualify the defendant and his children, and so therefore it has to be, if it's going to be kasher zamam, it has to be fully kasher zamam. And then the Gemara gave Bar Pedah's answer, the one who causes the person to be a cholol, he himself is not a cholol. What that means is, Kohen hanoses agrusha, let's say a Kohen marries a divorcee, shemechal zaro, so that's going to be mechal his children. His children are not considered to be Kohanim. Ein hu atzmo mischal min hakuna. The halacha happens to be that the Kohen himself who married the divorcee, he himself is not disqualified from being a Kohen. So habolachal v'lochil, someone who's trying to do it and doesn't succeed, meaning eid zomim, this false witness, sheratzalachal v'lochilo, he wanted to disqualify this person, but he didn't disqualify the person. Eino din, so shouldn't it be true that he shouldn't become a cholol? But the Gemara said to that, if so, in Basel lidrosh kal v'chomer, if you want to make this kal v'chomer, be'edim zomim and ba'edim zomin, bital the Torah hazam, then you've totally nullified the whole concept of hazama ba'edim zomimin. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Beis Amid Beis.